Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you are meeting me for the first time, you've never seen me before, hello, my name is Bronte. I am a language coach. So I help language learners create consistent and sustainable routines for their language studies so that you can start using the languages that you're learning. Because the goal is not just to learn languages, but to use them in some way. And I think a lot of us get really caught up in the learning and the studying that we forget that. So my goal or my hope is that in all the things that I create and I share in the ways that I support language learners, that I can help people make that shift into, reminding yourself that the goal is to use it, and then making sure that every effort you're putting in is strategically in place to help you get there and then maintain that skill. So today, as you might have seen by the title, again, either if you're on TikTok or on YouTube, the topic today is two different things. Laddering languages, which I talk about all the time, but I wanted to break down a little bit more in depth here. And the second one is a language learning audit. I get a ton of questions from people who are restarting a language. You've been learning a language for a while, or you did in the past for a few years, whether it was you were learning a language in school, you were self-studying a language, whatever circumstance it might have been in. You took a break, an extended break, a couple months, a few years, a lot of years, and you're like, okay, I'm ready to jump back into this, but I don't even know where to start, Bronte. Like I don't know what to do. I am here to help you with that, with the language learning audit. And then laddering languages is one of my favorite strategies that I use all the time for balancing multiple languages. I'm going to break those down. Let me know if you have any questions about these two things or just language learning questions in general, because I love to answer them. It's literally why I do what I do. But I wanted to start with the audit because I feel like that is a little bit more familiar to a lot of people. And then laddering languages, if you've never heard me or another language learner talk about it, that's like fairly new. And I want to give some time to that. So when it comes to restarting a language, well, one of the first things that I always recommend, so I actually have a few of my students and clients who have restarted some languages or are in the process of doing that. And I've done it so many times myself in the past. One of the very first things that I always recommend is to evaluate where you are right now in your language studies. Taking an objective look at your language studies. You need to say, okay, what language am I trying to restart? Usually you know that, but where am I right now with my skills and where am I trying to go? You need to get clarity. Clarity is the very first thing that every single person that I work with goes through. You need to identify things like the gaps, if any, that you have in your language studies. And you also need to, one of the things that I recommend keeping in mind is that there's a big difference between completely forgetting everything, like you don't remember anything that you've learned. You look at it and you're like, nope, did not learn that, did not learn that, did not learn this. There's a difference between that and just not remembering. Like you need to refresh the information. And so it's really important to take stock of all these different pieces. Because most of the time, like 99% of the time when you're restarting a language, you don't actually have to start from the beginning. But most of us, our instinct is to start from the beginning, to go back to where, not just where you left off, but to start over. To be like, I'm just going to erase everything that I've done, start again. And so I always recommend don't do that. So there's a big difference between not remembering the info, completely forgetting it, and then just needing a refresh. And it's important to know the difference and where you are with your language study. So for example, one of my current students slash clients, I call her both because she's a student of my course and now she's a client in my membership for language coaching. She is restarting French. I have another person who is getting into restarting Japanese. And so they have to evaluate, and the conversation that we had is you have to evaluate what is missing. So go back to the resources that you've used in the past, the textbooks that you might have used, the videos that you watched, the music that you listened to, and use that as a way to measure your progress. Do you still have the same level of understanding with these resources or not? That is a big, that is I guess, important step in identifying the gaps. So for example, when I was restarting Japanese, I took Japanese for 3 years, and then I had to self-study for 2 years on my own, and progress was slow and a lot of my skills regressed. They went backwards. It was a mess. I literally grabbed the Genki textbooks that I used in class, Genki 1 and Genki 2. And I looked through the books. I wasn't studying, but I looked through the chapters, looked through the vocabulary, read some of the, reading sections, because most textbooks have like a reading section and then a vocab section. And I literally read through those and I go, how much of this do I still understand? Because in Japanese 1, that my Japanese 1 class, we did this entire textbook. I should know this. And if I don't, what parts of it are a little unfamiliar to me? And then I look at, the second textbook and do the same process. And so this is the kind of thing that I always recommend people doing. Go and do an audit first. But there's some things that I want to, bring up to keep in mind, because there are some mistakes that people make when they're doing this process. And I kind of stated some of them already. Starting completely over from the beginning. Don't do it. Do not do it. That is a waste of your time. Another one is what I like to call routine wandering, which is if you're trying to restart a language and you just go, okay, I'm just going to do this. And you just pick up a random map and you start doing it. And you're like, oh, someone said I should do this thing over here, so I'm going to go do that instead. And you start doing that for a little bit. It's like you're just all over the place. You have no system, no routine, no strategy. You're just doing all the things a little bit at a time. You're dabbling. That's going to slow your progress down. The other thing that you want to avoid is like when you do not do this audit and like you don't identify these different gaps, this can often lead to things like decision fatigue, which means you're making tons of decisions because there's so many options. There's so many resources to choose. There's so many strategies to choose. Everyone has a different opinion, especially with languages that are more common like Spanish, French, Japanese, Korean, Mandarin, Russian, German, list goes on, languages that are more popular to learn and therefore have a lot more resources. That means there's a lot of decisions that you have to make. And if you're constantly making these decisions in the moment, you're going to exhaust yourself and you're going to burn out, especially if your sort of answer to fixing it, you're like, okay, I'm restarting Spanish, I'm restarting French. I'm going to jump back in and study for 3 hours. 5 days a week. You're going to burn out. It's going to lead to burnout. And then you're going to take another break for 4 to 6 weeks, months, and have to do it all over again. So I want to remind you, please, be mindful of how you restart, be kind to yourself, give yourself grace, and just start off with the clarity first. So you know what you're working with. You don't need to jump in. Like you did this once. Right? You learned this language once up to a point. You know you can do it again. And you know you can get farther than that. If what you tried before didn't work and that was the reason you took a break, don't do that. Either adapt the thing that didn't work and the thing that caused you to take a break, or choose something different. It is not a reflection on you as a person when you make these changes in your language studies. It is just a sign that something in your study system is not working. You got to do something different. It is also okay to take your time. I see so many language learners who feel like they're in a rush. Unless you have a deadline, like you have a job that is requiring you to learn a language, or you have a trip that is already scheduled and paid for, there is almost no reason to be rushing your language studies when it is a lifelong journey. Because you don't just learn a language, you learn it and maintain it. You're still using it. You don't just learn it and then you never forget anything. Because, I know from my experience, think about how many words, I think about how many words or things in my native language I forget. We're like, oh, that thing, the thingamajig, the thingamabob, the person with the name, because you don't remember a person's name, or you're trying to write something in formal language that you don't use often in conversation. And you're like, how do I say this word? Is it drink, drank, drunk? Like which one? And obviously you get to the point, but there's a moment of hesitation. Like we do that in our native language and we give ourselves so much grace. We're like, it is okay to make these mistakes. It doesn't matter to me. But suddenly when we switch into a foreign language, suddenly we have to be perfect. We have to be 100% all the time, every day. That is unrealistic. So know that it's okay to take your time. It is okay to ease back into your studies when you're restarting, to be like, hey, I used to, at my peak, study for 2 hours, 5 days a week. I am not going to start from this new reset at 2 hours. I'm going to start with 15 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe an hour. I would stick to the 15, 30 minutes though, to build back up that habit. Because if you took a break, if you have to restart, chances are you haven't studied anything for a long time, enough for you to fall out of the habit. You have to build that habit back up, and it takes time. So I gave some examples, but I wanted to give some more examples of my own language studies and the ways that I have restarted. Just one, I feel like I work best by example. So I always feel supported when I hear other people's examples. And I just wanted people to know that, hey, I get it. I'm not just saying this because this is what people I work with go through. I've been studying languages for almost 15 years, if not longer than that, whether you measure my informal and, official studies. And so I've done almost all the things. And one of the, I guess, to me, it's funny now that I look back at it. One of the experiences I had was with Korean. I started learning Korean in 2008, which makes me feel really old to think about. And when I started learning Korean, I was almost exclusively using talktomeinkorean.com. So at that time, they didn't have textbooks. They didn't have all the mini courses. They just had their main courses and their podcasts. And that was essentially the levels. So as they were developing the next levels, level 2, level 3, level 4 in Talk to Me Korean, they were like, hey, we just uploaded, or we just, released level 4. I'm like, wow, now I get to go to level 4. I was following along as they were releasing new content. That's when I was learning. And then at some point, I think I got to level 4, level 5. I just stopped. I was studying, but I wasn't using anything. So I was cramming a lot of information in, but I didn't know how to use any of it because I wasn't speaking. I wasn't writing. I wasn't actively reading beyond just writing down notes from the lesson and going, okay, I get it. Let's move on. And so I took maybe a 6-month break where I was just listening to music. And when I came back, they were like, hey, we're no longer on level 5. We now have level 7. I was like, wait, there's 2 more levels? And for context, if you're not studying Korean and you've never gone to the Talk to Me Korean website, each level has about 20 to 30 lessons. So I had missed about 60 lessons. And I was like, now I have to catch up. Now there's this pressure to catch up. And my first instinct was, I got to binge study. I mean, I didn't say that to myself, but I was like, now I got to dedicate 2 hours to these lessons so I can catch up to the level they're at, so that when they release the next one, I'm ready. That is not the right decision to make. Coming from personal experience, no. Still pace yourself. It is okay to just say, hey, I had to take a break. Things got really overwhelming. I need to reset. We're going to start from scratch. That's why I call it a reset, because you're acknowledging that the past was a little difficult, and you're saying, I'm just going to do the best that I can right now. Yeah, you stopped at level 4 too. See, it's not just me at all. And so, when I recognized that I needed to do an audit, because when I actually got back in, I was like, oh, I don't really remember things from level 4. There's some things in level 3 I don't know. I was like, I got to start from level 1 again. And so not only was I cramming new information and trying to study for 2 hours when I had not studied for any time for about 6 months, but I started back at level 1, which meant there were about 30, 120 lessons that I wanted to restart before I even jumped into the new content that I didn't know. That was an extra mistake. That was an extra mistake that I should not have made. And I recognize that now, because I wasted so much time. I didn't just study them. I went back and rewrote all the notes. Because I thought that restarting meant literally starting from beginner so that I could figure out what I missed. No, all I had to do, the me now knows that all I had to do was go through some of the lessons and literally just look at the titles and go, if I can't really bring up any vocabulary related to that, then I'm going to check it out. Otherwise, I could actually just start from level 5. I can just keep going. And anything that I've missed, I can review as I need it versus pushing myself to redo it all. You did something similar and also use, oh yeah, King Sejong Institute. Yeah, I like that. Is it a YouTube channel? I know there's like an app for them as well. But yeah, I definitely, it was just a mess. It was a mess. And this wasn't the only language that I did this with. So I did this with Korean, and then I had a similar philosophy for French, although French was self-study. I had a similar philosophy for Mandarin because I took that for 1 year in school, forgot almost everything, was like, I have to start from the beginning. No, please don't. If you take nothing else from what I am saying right now, please do not restart your language studies from the beginning if you are trying to come back into it. Please don't. Do not waste your time. Instead, like I said, look at the gaps. You can review some of the things that you've done, or you can literally just start from where you've left off, because chances are, as you get back into the swing and you start to look at the things that you studied before, you're going to remember some things. You're going to be like, oh, I recognize this word. I don't exactly remember what it means, but I kind of know it. Yes, you are absolutely not alone. And like, my story that I'm telling you right now is not just an isolated one. Like, this is the experience that so many of my students and clients have as well. And so I'm telling this to be like, hey, one, it's a normal reaction, but I am also cautioning you to not do that. Like, listen to that reaction and say, hey, I recognize this, and then go, I'm not going to restart. Bronte said, do not restart. Bronte said, don't restart. Just review and keep moving forward. And so when it comes to like auditing your language studies, there are 4 different areas that I generally look at and evaluate for myself, and I help my people evaluate.